A lot of people are already waiting for our best hero list for Season 36, and I've also seen many posts saying they're really struggling in solo rank right now. So in this video, I'm not just going to tell you the best heroes to carry in solo rank, I'll also show you how to carry games even when your teammates are Dark System. Let's start with this solo rank monster, Masha. She's literally a beast in solo queue, because her skill set is built for 1 versus 1 situations. No matter which EXP laner you face, Masha can easily melt them down, since her skill 1 deals damage based on the enemy's max HP, plus her physical attack. And shout out to this guy, yeah, Diroth is strong in 1 versus 1 early game, but Masha is proving that wrong. Plus, her skill 2 reduces the enemy's attack speed by 50%, giving her an even bigger advantage in pure basic attack duels. Check out how Alucard gets surprised when I use my skill 4 to recover 1 HP bar and outplay him, even with him using Vengeance. Even a duo will run when they see Masha charging in this fast, because there's no way to stop her. You'll likely need a burst damage that can quickly drain her HP, because Masha can easily remove all crowd control effects right after losing an HP bar. Even under your tower, you're not safe if there's a Masha on the enemy team. Even Carl TZ from Liquid PH was surprised by how strong Masha is. It's funny because Carl is godlike with 30 kills in this match, but Masha can still take him down easily. To carry your team using Masha, just stay relaxed in the early game. Wait until you get your ultimate and first item, especially if you're up against heroes like Cece, who are hard to get close to. Once you have your item, you can now fight back and go for a kill. I usually go for Hephaestus' first item, but if you're up against a sustained hero, go straight for Sea Halberd. For the emblem, I use the newly buffed Temporal Rain to reduce the cooldown of skill 1 after using Masha's ult. And it's better compared to Lethal Ignition because most of Masha's power comes from her skill 1. For the item build, you can swap some items for BOD for instant -1 enemy. But if the enemy can burst you down easily, go for Rose Gold or Immortality. As for the emblem, Lethal Ignition and Impure Rage are still good options if you prefer them. And here's the build I'm using. Sky Piercer is really great for Masha. Another monster in solo rank is Freya, who can also beat Masha in the late game. Freya also dominates solo rank, and is often one trick to reach Mythical Immortal because she's super strong. Even pros ban this hero in ranked matches because she can wipe out all 5 enemies by herself. But if the enemy has too much crowd control, it's better to go for Masha since Freya relies heavily on basic attacks and has no skills to remove stuns. And if it happens that the enemy has no skill to stop Freya, she will completely dominate the game, and even the turret can't save you from her extremely painful basic attacks. This is because her passive grants 200% attack speed for her next 2 basic attacks after casting a skill, which is super easy to trigger since her skill 2 has no cooldown as long as there's someone to hit. You can also follow up skill 1 right after the 3rd phase of skill 2 to speed up the animation and catch enemies off guard. The reason I prefer them in the XP lane is that you have a better chance of winning since, aside from your jungle acting as a core, you will also act as a core while laning in the XP lane. It's different from the high ranks, where the XP lane becomes a semi-tank initiator in the mid to late game. And meta XP laners like Hylos, Hilda, and Lucas don't perform well in lower ranks, because late game damage heroes that can easily wipe out your team are the usual picks in that bracket. And it's so hard to constantly protect your teammates when using a tanky XP laner, so it's better to use damage dealing XP laners to climb out of this rank. And also, people say Sun is also a strong hero in solo rank, and yeah, he can be, but he's not as powerful as the 2 I mentioned earlier. You usually have to wait until the late game to see Sun's true power. Now in the mid lane, we have here the newly buffed Pharsa. With her Wings by Wings being faster, and her passive triggering quicker, Pharsa has become one of the best mages to use, whether in solo, duo, trio, or even 5-man. Because of that buff, she can now rotate faster across the map and help other lanes that need assistance more quickly. The impact it can create on the match is huge, because just being present in crucial skirmishes and clashes can instantly boost your chances of winning by providing assistance to all your allies. Aside from her insane damage, her ultimate skill range is so long that enemies will have a hard time getting close to you. That's why she's one of the mages who can easily carry games right now. Next, still in the meta, Cecilion. No major changes for Cecilion, so he's still one of the toughest mages to deal with. Sicilian's passive is the reason he can carry the team even as a mage. So if you're behind early, just stay calm and keep stacking until you hit the late game with tons of stacks. He's also super easy to use, so you won't have a hard time playing him. And just entered the meta, and already dominating rank matches, we've got Selena on the list. Selena is also a strong mid lane carry that can easily take over games. Damn! It's because Selena's skill cast speed in both forms was increased, making her much smoother to use, although her max stun duration was reduced to 2.5 seconds. The main problem with Selena compared to the first two heroes is that, aside from being a bit complex, landing your arrows is extremely important. Especially in the late game, where every arrow is crucial. If you keep missing them, your Selena will become useless. That's why some players go for max cooldown builds to spam arrows, but you still need to aim them properly. And also, Selena's clearing capability is now faster, allowing you to rotate more efficiently. In rank matches, it's better to play Selena in mid because roam Selena is too risky. I've encountered too many Selena roam players who were useless in the game. Not only do they keep missing arrows, but you also lose a solid front line and a reliable stun, relying purely on whether the arrow hits during rotations. Now, let's talk about Shushin, who just got adjusted. Opinions are split among players who've tried her after her adjustments. A lot of players are saying her mana drains too fast now, and she's not as strong as she used to be. And yeah, you'll immediately feel how fast Shushin's mana drains just after using skill 2 for a few seconds. But what if I told you she's now even better for solo play than before?
You serious?
I was surprised too, but once you try her, you'll realize that the adjustment isn't a nerf. They boosted her skill 2 damage in exchange for higher mana consumption, so you don't need to chain multiple airborne anymore. Just one is almost as strong as 2 throws before. You will notice in this game how aggressive my Shushin is here. And in the 2 games I tried her, I can still feel Shushin's potential. She's still insanely strong in my opinion. And I can say this because in this match, I completely dominated and carried my team since our core alpha, who was supposed to counter Suyu, wasn't doing well. On the enemy team, it was Suyu doing the heavy lifting, making it feel like a Shushin versus Suyu showdown to see who could carry harder. My strategy in situations like this is to focus on the strongest enemy, because the carry is the most dangerous threat and can easily wipe out my teammates. So in this match, I locked my focus on Suyu. At this moment, my teammates were starting to catch up, even though the enemy still had more kills. And since our core was dead, I needed to keep Suyu from getting close. In the late game, I managed to carry my team. So overall, I'd still include Shushin on the list because I can still feel her superiority as a mage. For roam, we've got Hylos. Though he received multiple nerfs, he remains a solid pick on solo rank. And this is because he's such a complete package as a tanky roamer. He has a speed boost and stun from his skill 1, slow, damage, and attack speed reduction from his skill 2, and glorious pathway for solid teamfight engagement with a huge AoE effect that can provide movement speed to allies while slowing enemies. These types of roamers dominate solo rank because they can threaten even the gold lane or jungle. They're not just about crowd control and being a front line, they can also deal serious damage. Setter tanks like Tigreal are good, but your allies aren't always there to finish off the enemies. That's why it's better to go for roamers that can deal damage. The most important thing when using heroes like this is not to dive in too deep. Just because you're tanky and deal damage doesn't mean you're immortal. Another roamer with solid damage is Jawhead, who's pretty popular right now. Jawhead's pick-off capability as a roamer is super solid, and what's even better is that you can choose to go full tank or semi-tank and still deal a good amount of damage. Look at how easily he can get close and take down the enemy gold laner. Jawhead can even melt down tanks because the damage from his missiles is really devastating. Another one is Gatot Gacha, who is still a very solid pick. His passive is kinda crazy since it gives up to 100 physical defense based on how much HP he's lost. And the best part? His ultimate is a reliable setup tool, making him a great initiator in team fights. Meanwhile, Estus is also great for solo rank because most players don't know how to deal with him. They just keep charging in, even though they know Estus can heal back all the damage they dish out. There's even a technique where you just stick with your core or marksman, and the enemies can't do anything about it. They'll be too focused on their own thing, not realizing that Estes has already made the carry unstoppable. Now for gold laners, Granger is number 1 on our list and still super strong despite his recent nerf. Granger is still really tough to match in the lane because once he gets his ultimate, his damage becomes incredibly painful. On top of that, the damage from his skill 1 feels so unfair because not only is it painful, but it also seems endless. In the pro scene, Granger maintains a 100% contention rate, meaning he's either always picked or banned. Hopefully, in the next updates, Granger gets nerfed again, so other marksmen have a chance to shine. And while he's not nerfed yet, if he's not banned, you should always prioritize picking Granger if you're a gold laner. Irithel is a marksman often picked as a counter to Granger, and she can definitely hold her own against him. But if you've mastered Granger, even Irithel won't be enough to stop him. And of course, still in the meta and super overpowered, we have Harith. Although playing Harith in the gold lane is harder and unusual for most players since it takes a lot of practice to perfect his unli dash, once you get the hang of it, you'll realize just how powerful Harith can be. Harith can easily take over games when played correctly, making him a deadly threat in the late game. That's why he remains a popular pick even in the pro scene. Just like Granger, Harith is also really strong in the laning phase because his skill 1, Synchro Fission, deals a good amount of damage. If you want to learn more about Harith, I've already made an in-depth guide that includes tips and tricks to master him. And just entering the meta after his buff, we have Brody. For those who haven't noticed, Brody has actually received 2 consecutive buffs. The most recent one reduced the backswing on his skills, meaning he can now move faster after casting them, unlike before. And that makes Brody even scarier to face in the laning phase, especially since his items are built for a one-hit combo playstyle, completely different from the usual attack speed marksman. The main thing to remember is that while Brody deals higher damage when hitting enemies with a Bismarck, he gains less attack speed from items. That's why you'll often see him building pure damage items like Heptasias and Sky Piercer, which hit really hard, particularly in the early game. We can definitely create a full guide for Brody if there are people who are interested, since his passive and skills require a more detailed explanation. If you're not used to the gold lane heroes I mentioned earlier, Moskov is one of the strongest marksmen who can carry games on his own. If you think about it, even though his range is relatively short, Moskov's skills are a complete package. He has a blink that boosts his attack speed and a stun that lasts surprisingly long for a marksman. And the best part is, with every basic attack, their cooldown will be reduced by 0.5 seconds. And these 2 skills are also the reason why he's hard to kill. They give him both mobility and survivability, and will allow Moskov to carry his teammates effectively. Add to that his map presence due to his global ultimate, which makes it easier for him to help with objectives, especially in Turtle and Lord fights. For Moskov's build, you can go for a crit build if the enemies are squishy, but personally, I prefer the Trinity build to maximize the cooldown reduction on your passive so you can blink and stun repeatedly in a fight. And one of the poisons in solo rank, we have Mia. Let's be honest, Mia's late game capabilities are insane. Even if she has a rough early game, she still becomes incredibly strong later on. As you can see, despite having 3 enemies chasing me, they still can't do anything against Mia. Not even Beleric or Hayabusa. They really pressured me in the early game in this match, but look who's the boss now. Mia's ultimate is also really great because it can save her in almost any situation. And on top of that, she has an immobilize effect that counters so many abilities since it disables enemies for about 1.2 seconds. I've also seen many instances where Mia players can easily take down Meta Granger and Harith, so Mia is definitely not to be underestimated, even after her nerf. Of course, we can't forget about Layla, another big threat in the late game, and a poison in rank matches. Layla's massive basic attack range makes her super hard to get close to, particularly in the late game when she has completed her items. When positioned well, she can melt enemies before they get the chance to reach her, making Layla one of the best heroes for turning games around. There are times when I even ban Layla, because when the enemy picks her, we assume it's an easy game. But in reality, once the match reaches the late stage, our teammates start dropping one by one, and that's something really hard to control. The problem with Layla is that she's the most favorite target when picked for the gold lane because she's easy to target and doesn't deal much damage early on. So, if you're playing solo and no one helps you, you'll really have to hug the tower. I just happened to be helped by this Baxia, and kudos to him because he didn't leave me hanging. So overall, Layla is still really strong in solo queue, which is why we can't just leave her off the list. Now let's move on to the jungle, and let's start with the most unfair pick right now, Lucas. Just from the recent update, where the second phase of his ultimate got buffed instead of nerfed, we already anticipated in our last video that damaged Lucas would become popular because of it. Aside from the fact that Lucas's shockwave can now damage all enemies it hits, its damage was also greatly increased, almost doubled. That's why Lucas is an absolute threat in ranked matches right now. Not to mention that his ultimate increases all his attributes by 15%, and his first skill cannot be interrupted. I'm pretty sure the upcoming Naruto collab sale will definitely be successful, especially with Lucas being super overpowered right now. And honestly, there are so many junglers that can easily carry games in solo rank, like these 4 assassins that are always in the top bans. But even though they're often banned, you should still learn how to use them, especially if you're a jungler. The only problem with them compared to fighter junglers is that they require practice because they're squishy and rely heavily on mechanics and fast movements, like Joy, whose skills are simple to understand, but require a lot of practice to truly carry games. And of course, there's Fanny, the hardest hero to use in MLBB. But once mastered, she becomes an absolute monster in solo rank. But remember, don't practice her in ranked matches, or you'll just end up throwing games. Hayabusa is easier to use compared to the previous 2, but he's also the most banned assassin, so he's rarely open in ranked matches. And it's obvious that Hayabusa is insanely strong in solo rank, which is why he was recently nerfed, but it turned out to be a hidden buff instead. His ultimate's damage actually increased, probably because of his upcoming Kakashi skin. Hanzo also got nerfed, but he remains incredibly strong since his ultimate now has a shorter cooldown at the cost of higher energy consumption. His trade-off actually works in his favor, as he can spam his ult more often. Plus, enemies tend to burst it down as soon as they spot it anyway. But if you're looking for a jungler who isn't banned as often as the previous 4, Julian is a solid option. Although Julian's main role was changed to assassin to prevent the abuse of Rose Gold's effect, he's still incredibly strong as a core. And even before the new Rose Gold was introduced, he was already a powerful pick. This is because Julian is super versatile and has powerful skills that let him adapt to any matchup, whether he's ahead or behind. Even without a gold lead, he can still dish out insane damage and sustain in fights. His enhanced skill 1 is also terrifying in the early game because it melts anyone who gets hit, making him a serious threat right from the start. And his enhanced skill 2 is perfect for outplaying enemies, still working well with the Rose Gold, even though he only gets half of its effect now. And of course, there's Suyu, another incredibly strong pick who doesn't get banned as often. Suyu is one of the heroes in the pro scene that never gets ignored. Either he's picked or banned because he's just that strong. His Immortal form, or the one with the Susanoo, is extremely powerful because it increases his basic attack damage to 125%, while also granting him 20% damage reduction up to 40%. That's why, even early on, Suyu's damage can be crazy, making him a real headache to deal with. Aside from his damage and sustainability, he also has a stun and a ton of mobility with his dashes. And when you think about it, his skills are just way too overpowered. He has the durability of a fighter, making him hard to burst down, and the speed of an assassin, so it's tough to catch him. Plus, he hasn't been nerfed yet, likely because of the upcoming Sasuke skin, which has everyone hyped. I also want to mention Karina because I rarely see her on lists of the best heroes, and I honestly don't know why. But for me, she's one of the strongest junglers in solo, especially if your enemies rely heavily on basic attack. It's also terrifying when you're up against a Karina, especially if you're using a squishy hero. Escaping becomes incredibly tough because her presence is just so overwhelming. Aside from that, Karina is much easier to use compared to the other assassins I mentioned earlier. You just need to get close to the enemy, and she can quickly take them down. Another one is Alice, whose overall win rate has been rising lately due to the insane sustain she gets from her ultimate. It's become harder to take her down, given that many other heroes have been nerfed, which is why Alice is making a strong comeback in the meta. Lastly, there's Alpha, who is capable of handling a 1 versus 5 situation, so we can't leave him out of this list. I've also created a guide for him, and if you haven't watched it yet, you can check it out on our channel. Special mention to YSS and Alucard, who can also carry games on their own. And although we have a video about Kalea in the XP lane, Roam Kalea is still the better pick for solo rank due to her pickoff and healing capabilities. Meanwhile, even though Badang was nerfed, he is still a great choice for roaming. But don't forget that counter picks and comfort picks are better than meta picks. So becoming comfortable with meta picks and counter picks will definitely get you to higher rank.